Hi everyone. So this is the math video for going through the Chapter 6 quiz. I want to go through the quiz with you. If you made 100 on the quiz, if you didn't miss anything, then you can skip this video and move on to the Chapter 7 pretest and go ahead and do that. Otherwise, I do want you to go through the video with me, pay particular attention to what you missed. If you want to, if you haven't figured this out, you can go into the assignments and look at the graded work, and you can see the work that was returned there, and in the little feedback box, I tell you what you made on the quiz and gave you the answers for any of the ones that you missed. But I want to go through and work through the test for you so that if you have any question or confusion about something, you can get that cleared up. So I'm going to switch over to my document camera, and then we will go through the Chapter 6 test.
Okay, so I've gone ahead and filled in the first part with the vocabulary. The numerator appears above the fraction bar, and the denominator appears below it. Two fractions that have different denominators are called unlike fractions. And the multiplication rule is used to rename a mixed number as an improper fraction. Okay, the next part, adding fractions. Now this one's fairly simple. We're just adding. I don't actually have to do anything with my 2 wholes here, but I am going to have to change my 2/5 to tenths so that I can then add these together. Remember, with mixed numbers, we can just add the whole and the fraction part together. So this, I'm going to change to 4/10 plus 1/10. Now notice one of the mistakes some people made was to forget your 2 here. So don't forget your 2. And this is 2 5/10. And 2 5/10. Don't forget to simplify. 2 1/2. Oops, that was messy. 2 1/2, because 5/10 reduces down to 1/2. I think I'm going to switch to a darker pen to make it easier for you to see. Okay, in this one we have 3 minus 3/4 minus 5/8. I did have a couple people that added here instead of subtracting. So I know I'm going to want to change everything into eighths. And when I change this, it's going to be 6/8 minus 5/8. And these I have to subtract from my 3 wholes. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to change my 3 wholes into eighths. 3 times 8 is 24, so this is going to be 24/8. And I'm going to subtract 6/8, because I'm going to change that to eighths, and then I'm going to subtract my 5/8. And when I subtract these out, I get 13/8. Now, in simplest form, 13/8, we can change that to 1 5/8 using our division rule. Okay. These last 2 most everybody got. These were pretty easy. So 1/2 is 4/8 minus 3/8 gives us 1/8. And then 1/3 and 1/9. 1/3 is the same as 3/9 plus 2/9 gives us 5/9. And I had very few mistakes on those. All right, this is another one. These 2 I had very few mistakes on. Using the division rule, we can change 9/7 to 1 2/7, and 20/9 goes to 2 2/9. Good. I have very few mistakes here on using the multiplication rule to get our improper fraction, although I did find it amusing that some of you got this right, but you missed the vocabulary part here on the multiplication rule. And this is the multiplication rule. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 2 is 17/5. And 9 times 2 is 18, plus 8 is 26 ninths. Okay. Now on to this part, and this was where a lot of points for the quiz came from. And this is why I worked in the review so hard for this. So the idea here is to use a model to find the fractional part of each number and then use multiplication to check your answers. Alright, so 2/5 of 30. If you remember in the review, we talked about how the fifths here, the denominator, tells us how many equal parts in our model we need. It's 5, so we're going to need 5 equal parts. Okay, pretend those look equal. And I know that the whole number is 30, and it wants 2/5. Okay, I know 1 unit is equal to 30 divided by 5, which gives me 6. So 1 unit is 6. It wants 2 units. 2 units is 6 times 2, which is 12. The multiplication rule is the quick way of doing that. That is 2 times 30 divided by 5, which gives us 12. So my answer is 12. Okay. The next one, same process. We have 8 because our denominator is 8. And our whole number, the whole thing is 64. And they're asking what is 3. There, what is 3 of those? 1 unit is going to be 64 divided by 8, which gives me 8, because 8 times 8 is 64. My 3 units is 8 times 3, which is 24. You can check this with the multiplication rule. 3 times 64 divided by 8. If you work that out, that's 24. All right. Next one, 3/4 of 32. My denominator is 4, so I know I've got 4 equal parts. Okay. The whole of it is 32. I'm asking for 3 of that. 1 unit equals 32 divided by 4, and that gives me 8. It asks for 3 units, which is 8 times 3, which is 24. I can use multiplication to check. 3 times 32 divided by 4 equals 24. All right, last one of these. 2/3 of 24. There's 3 in my denominator, so that's what I use here. And it wants 2 of those. So I know that 1 unit equals 24 divided by 3, which equals 8. 2 units is 8 times 2, which is 16. I can check that with the multiplication rule. 2 times 24 divided by 3. If you work that out, it's 16. Okay. So a lot of you, most of you got this. There were some confusion on this, or you got most of it and missed maybe, like in here, made mistakes. Next one. Pedro scored 1/4 of all the goals scored during a soccer game. He scored 2 goals. How many goals were not scored by Pedro? First thing that you do is you say blank goals were not scored by Pedro. Okay, it's the first thing we're finding. Okay. This is 1/4 of all goals. And I know that I'm using 4. There's fourths, so I know my total goals is split into 4 pieces. And I know that he scored 1/4 and that was 2 goals. Okay? He scored 2 goals, and that's the same thing as 1/4 of all the goals. The question is, what were the goals that were not scored by Pedro? So here, I'm already given the 1 unit, and that's 2. I have a couple ways I can find this out. I can say, I know what 1 unit is. All the units are the same, so I can say 3 units, because that's what he didn't score, is 2 times 3, which is 6. I could do it that way. Or I could say there are 4 units total, and that's 4 times 2 equals 8, but then I have to subtract out what he scored from the total number of points scored in the game to find out how many that he did not score. So he did not score 6 of the points. All right, there's our review.